Hey, what's up, everyone? Watashi wa KNDY desu. My name is Kennedy, and I am a VTuber that will be reviewing a lot of manga and comic books. And pretty much, um, I want to use this, I guess, this podcast as a way to talk about one of my favorite things that I grew up with, and that is comic books and manga. I have to credit reading these books as a young child because, I think like other people who are comic book readers, may you have had parents who were busy working. In my case, I had parents who were always busy, and often, to tie me over, my parents would buy me comic books while my aunt or my grandmother or grandfather, my grandparents, were taking care of me. And they always had their shows or grown-up shows. I know my aunt liked to watch a lot of horror, so I didn't want to watch any of that stuff. And my grandma was always watching her favorite shows at the time. And usually I would just have comic books that I would read over and over and over again. And sometimes my aunt, she'd make me do errands for her. Hey, can you go to the store and buy me this, and I'll give you some money so you can buy yourself a comic book. And it was a win-win. For me, that was one of the ways I would build my comic book collection. Of course, like a lot of teenagers, sometimes your passion for comic books ends, and it did end for me back. I think it was my sophomore year in high school, or freshman year actually, in high school. My father felt that, what, you're getting older. You're going to high school. You cannot keep reading these. I want you to stop. And he actually, made an ultimatum of getting rid of all of them, which was really sad on my part. And, I remembered selling my comic books to a friend, and, a friend's brother, that is. And I remember that, he offered me like $150, and because there was quite a bit. And by the time, he picked them up and he says, I'll pay you on this date. And guess what? Never got paid, and they moved away. And so I got nothing. And it was one of the probably the saddest moments of my life. And I couldn't really read another comic book after that. It was so heartbreaking to lose my favorite comic books and lose access to them. And I think, how I got back to reading them was actually years later. I was reading manga, but I think it started with manga, and slowly, while I was getting my manga, I was getting back into comic books again, and then I stopped. And I think maybe a decade or so, or many years have passed after that. And I knew someone who owned a comic book store, and he really wanted to get rid of a lot of his older stuff that weren't selling. A lot of stuff that, a lot of people were more into the new stuff, not the old stuff. And for me, having lost a lot of my comic books, back when I was a kid, I figured that, I worked the numbers out, and he gave me a deal, and I was able to get back a lot of my comic book collections that I've sold or lost. And I think, if anything, over the years, I've had a good collection of them. And I think, now I just feel like I've been really nostalgic that I've been reading a lot of comic books and manga again, and it's something to ease my mind, especially before I go to sleep. Because I know video games, there's only so much you can do, because video games actually, depending on the video games, visual novels is something, because it's almost like a comic book, but digitally, I guess you could say. But I think having a comic book in my hands is actually makes it worthwhile for me. Just brings me back. I know in this day of age, a lot of people read things digitally, and I've tried. I know that with the newer stuff, I remember Marvel and even DC would put these download codes. So I would use these codes and read comic books online. And I mean, it's all cool and stuff if you have a tablet. On a phone, not so much. I don't know how people do it. A little bit too small for me, but nothing beats having a comic book in your hand. For some people, trade paperback as well. Kind of want that physical thing. I know there's a lot of things that that in my life I've moved on digitally, video games and music, but and even movies, I guess you could say. But I think for me, comic books is just something that I really, really cannot say goodbye to. And it's something that's been a big part of my life. And what I want to do with this podcast is go through various comic books. I'll probably do like three or four a day, or 3 or 4 per podcast, and discuss them. So the first thing I want to talk about is not actually Bloodshot, which I'll probably talk about later, but we're going to start with this one. Marvel 2-in-1 Annual, starring The Thing. My goodness, this is probably... Look at this cover right here. Just this classic cover. The Thing holding it with his boxing gloves. And you got Thor, Colossus, Sasquatch, Namor, Hulk, Wonder Man behind him. And this is probably one of the best stories I've read as a kid that still holds up today. And every time I see it, I just feel like buying it, because every time I see it in someone's collection, or not someone's collection, but someone that's selling it at a convention or a shop, and they have several issues, I always want to pick this one up because it's just my favorite. I just feel like hanging it up on my getting an issue just to hang up on my wall. That's how much I loved it. But yeah, this one was released back in 1982, and this Marvel Comics titled Marvel 2-in-1 featured the Fantastic Four member Thing. He was pretty awesome. Actually, you know what? Growing up, I think Thing was one of my favorite characters. I think it's because he was a person that was always, though he was tough and brash, there was also a soft side in him, because he desperately wanted to go back to being human, to be normal. And of the Fantastic Four characters, he's the only one that was unable to revert back to his human form. And unfortunately, that has been a major storyline throughout the Fantastic Four run. But also, I love the fights between him and the Hulk. Even though Hulk won most of them, the Thing was just an awesome character. For me, it was. And this annual was written by Tom DeFalco, and it was penciled by Ron Wilson. Inkers were Camp, Esposito, Giacola, Green, Gill, and Stone. Letters by Jim Novak. Colors George Roussos. Editor Jim Salkrep, and editor-in-chief was Jim Shooter. So, back in 1978, DC Comics unveiled their comic book match between Superman versus Muhammad Ali. For those who remember that was pretty interesting. That popular storyline was written by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, which was a great fighter, which the greatest fighter on earth at the time, Muhammad Ali, must take on an alien fighter in a boxing match. Oh, actually, no. What am I talking about? I'm thinking about Superman and Muhammad Ali, but well, Superman's an alien. But this one, I guess this one was pretty much fighters taking on an alien, a very kick butt alien that was super tough. But what made this annual so entertaining is that it incorporated characters from the Marvel Universe, such as the Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, Alpha Flight, and more. The antagonist, the greatest boxer in the universe, known as the Champion, who wanted to take on Earth's greatest superheroes in a boxing match, going by official boxing rules. If they don't participate, the planet Earth is at stake. So 3-round set, no one having completed 1 round against the Champion. So will Earth's superheroes have a chance? So let me show you an image right here. Let's see if I can bring it here. No, not that one. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Let's bring this up a little. Hold on. There we go. Sorry about that. But actually, hold on here. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. Let's see if I can I'll lock this real quick so I don't mess it up. Let's bring it back in. Huzzah. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you can see this right here with the Champion going against Alpha Flight's Sasquatch. And you could just see that right there. He's just like, this dude was just so tough. Kind of unusual character, you know, with the big old, I guess you could say he's bald, but then he has that long hair in the back. But the dude kicked butt. And he was literally any of Earth's superheroes going against him. He was just tough. And I don't want to spoil this story for everyone. Even though it's an older story, it's something that I want people to read. It's a really, really awesome storyline. And pretty much, yeah, it's let me go back here. Hold on, guys. In a way, I think when I think about comic books today, if there was one that or even manga or even anime that was like super popular, that I think that really caught everyone's attention as of late. I remember the Dragon Ball Ultra, Super, and the fight with Goku versus what's his name again? Most of you probably who watch the series will understand, but this isn't the same thing. Earth's heroes taking on a great fighter, and my gosh, they just to see everyone, the world's toughest Marvel superheroes fighting against this Champion is just really awesome. So, built as the greatest boxing match on Earth, and these people were drafted into the fight are the Fantastic Four is the Thing, the Incredible Hulk, which is the Banner version. Although if Banner gets too angry, the Destructive Hulk comes out. The Mighty Thor, former Avenger Wonder Man at the time, who went on to do West Coast Avengers. X-Men's Colossus, Namor the Submariner, and Alpha Flight Sasquatch. These fighters are forced to train and fight for the boxing match, while Mr. Fantastic is trying to find ways to save them. Of course, not all superheroes are down with the rules, and unfortunately, they try to fight back. Thor tried to use his hammer during the fight. Unfortunately, that disqualifies him. Namor wants to fight, but not by boxing rules. And of course, he gets disqualified. And of course, the Hulk loses control, tears up his gloves. But by doing that, he is disqualified. So you're only left with Sasquatch Colossus, Wonder Man, and the Thing. So those 4 heroes are the only ones left to fight the champion. Again, personally, I don't want to spoil how this annual issue ends, but I will say it's one of my favorite comic books that I owned as a kid and enjoyed it as an adult, and it's just an awesome storyline. Just check it out, check it out, check it out. That's how I feel. But yeah, just looking back at this, and I'm just, even the artwork, the pencils by Ron Wilson was just fantastic. And I think this is, again, one of my favorite annuals that ever come out. Usually when you read annuals, Marvel comic book annuals, some of them are just like, they kind of suck. Sometimes they're non-canon. Well, they're canon, but they're just like, they're just, some of them are just so really badly made. And then you get some, like this one, that just is just really awesome. But yeah, that's Marvel 2-in-1 Annual, issue number 7, 1982. Let me go to another one. Hold on here. Okay, let's go to a DC comic book one. And yeah, let's try this one. So, this one is The Last Days of the Justice Society of America, issue number 1. It's a special. And this one was released back in 1986, and that's $2.50. For a kid, for like me, for reading. I love Justice Society. I love the Justice League of America, and anytime the Justice Society and Justice League, and there was another one that I can't think about right now. But anyway, every time they did these team up comic books, it was just so awesome. So anyway, this one was released back in 1986, and this one was written and edited by Roy Thomas. Penciler was David Ross. Inker was Mike Gustovich. Co-plotter Dan Thomas. Letterer David Cody Weiss. Colorist Carl Gafford. So, with the success of the 1985 DC comic miniseries America vs. the Justice Society of America, in 1986, Roy Thomas, David Ross, and Mike Gustovich created The Last Days of the Justice Society of America special. Set in Earth 2 with the death of President Roosevelt, Adolf Hitler has become powerful and wields the Staff of Destiny. He vows that if Germany is to fall, the whole planet will also fall. Gathered to pay homage to the fallen heroes are the Justice Society of America, led by Hawkman, Batman and his wife, the Catwoman, Richard Grayson, Helena Wayne, aka the Huntress. These individuals in the comic book, they have died. So Batman, Catwoman, Richard Grayson, Helena Wayne, they have died. As have Mr. Terrific, Superman, Lois Lane Kent, and Superboy. Please note that there's a lot of deaths that took place during the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline. So Wonder Woman and General Steve Trevor have left back to Mount Olympus, a location that no cartographer will or has mapped, so they can't get in touch with them. And so for the final meeting, Hawkman calls to dissolve the Justice Society of America as the group's time has passed. But once they are to disband out of nowhere, the Spectre comes to show Dr. Fate that there is a greater threat that will destroy the planet. This gives Dr. Fate to show them a different past from 1945, when America's heroes were killed by this greater threat, but given a second chance and knowing what happens. So can the Justice Society of America prevent this disaster from happening? So let me go ahead and bring up an image right now. Let's see here. Hold on here. Let's see if I can get that image on here. I hope I can. Okay, here we go. Almost. Let's see. Right here. So you can see here the characters are pretty much paying tribute. And this gets really confusing because if you read a lot of the 80s comic books, let's say let's say Batman, or there's a lot of Earths. I think that's one of the reasons why Crisis of Infinite Earths came out. So DC got themselves in a lot of trouble by doing these not multiverse, but multiple Earths, and I think Marvel had the multiverse, right? But the thing is that there's so many Earths that two different Supermans, or Superboy existed and Superman existed at the same time, and it was just getting a little confusing. But this one was actually pretty cool because Justice Society has always been this superhero group that would exist in I guess you could say, the 1940s during World War II. May not be the World War II that people may be familiar with in our time frame, I guess you could say, but a different time frame where things were really bad. Things weren't going well for Earth's heroes. And as a Justice Society of America longtime reader and fan of many DC Comics superheroes, even if they are from different alternate Earth timelines, the issue was quite bleak upon reading it, and it was a way to kill off the Justice Society of America minus 3 characters, and then to promote the superhero group Infinity Incorporated. And it was agreed that with the staff in DC Comics at the time that the deaths of key heroes of Earth 2 were killed off in Crisis of Infinite Earths, it was time for the JSA to be killed off. And so it was Roy Thomas and the crew's job to make it happen with this issue. While there is a greater threat other than Adolf Hitler and the Nazis that are shown in this issue, and probably one of the few rare moments where you will see Thor, no, not Marvel's Thor, appear in a DC's Comics issue along with other Asgardians. The threat takes a realistic look of what if the world's greatest superheroes were put in the battlefield to fight the Nazis. Knowing that most of the superheroes are not immortal or bulletproof, I think one can foresee how things will end for these superheroes. For a lot of superheroes, we are used to seeing them dodging bullets or having some defensive capability, but during a war when thousands of soldiers have machine guns, there really is not much that can be done, and the Nazi soldiers are not the only major threat, as the superheroes must take on giant behemoths with great strength and power. It's really interesting how the writers planned this special, because it is no doubt dark, and all the hope and happy endings you have come to find in a comic book, especially during the 1980s. There's not too much hope in this issue. You get a good number of cameos in this issue, especially from Infinity Incorporated, and a one-page JSA story from the never-published issue of the original All-Star Comics, featuring the Justice Society versus the Psycho Pirate. And for those of you who need more context, a lot of text is featured in the inside covers, front and back of the storyline. The issue was no doubt a shocker back then, but at the same time, I felt I had the rug pulled right under me. This is not a way to kill off DC superheroes. A special one-page issue, or not? I mean, a special one-issue release. But I knew in my heart that, like many other superhero deaths in comic books, there will be a comeback someday. And sure enough, the Justice Society of America came back even stronger. As you know, superheroes just don't die that easily. They don't remain dead. They always find a way to, writers always try to find a way to make them come back for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong reasons. But yeah, this issue was pretty sad back then. It was just, to see how, because they had no choice. They had to kill off the JSA, and this was their way of doing it. So, Roy Thomas definitely had his work cut for him, because this is a tough one. This was a really tough one, and but for the most part, yeah, I think if anything, this issue was definitely a special that I felt was worth reading. Okay, so the next one, let's go to it, and it is Bloodshot. I figured I'll bring a Valiant issue on here, right? Now, I don't know about most of you, but I read Valiant earlier on, and when I went to comic book shops, there were certain characters that I actually read the key versions because they were on sale, and no one really cared about Magnus or Solar, but I was reading that stuff. I didn't maybe understand what's going on so much, but as a kid, I was like, "Ooh, I have an old issue. Maybe it's going to be worth a lot of money." Just kidding, no. Or not, I'm not kidding, because I think every kid felt back then that when you had something old, it'd be worth something. But anyway, I just remembered that one of the comic books I did enjoy from Valiant, though, was not Bloodshot, but Rye. Rye was very cool. Bloodshot was really interesting, and it was interesting that there was a movie that came out for a live-action film, but there's different incarnations of Valiant. So I know there's a new one out there, probably very popular. I have not read much, but the Valiant that I read was the one of the 90s, and that's the one I grew up reading, and one that I really loved. So this one I remember came out, and it had this special cover. Remember that? What they call these covers? Acid. I forgot what it's called. But anyway, this one was released back in 1993 and was written by Kevin Van Hook. Penciler was Don Perlin. Inker was Bob Wyasek, and colorist was Jade Moiti. With the announcement from Valiant Comics that a live-action film version of Bloodshot was being made, I definitely, it made me want to go read this comic book. And again, February 1993. And I just remembered that with Valiant, it was so hard to get these issues. You had to be lucky. And, or had a good relationship with the comic book owner, because getting them were pretty hard back then, especially with Image comic books and a lot of certain independents that were so popular. But anyway, a character that was first revealed several months earlier in Valiant comic series, Eternal Warrior, issue number 4. While I knew nothing about the newer Valiant comic books, I will say that back in the early 90s, I was a big fan of Valiant Comics before Wizard Magazine started putting the comics in their top 10 rankings and making everyone want to jump on the bandwagon and purchase any Valiant that they can find. They were considered comics to invest in due to the low print run. But anyway, at that time, I could care less about how much they were worth. All that mattered to me was how awesome Valiant comics were and how much I loved the storyline. So with the release of Bloodshot Volume 1, Issue 1, there was no doubt in my mind that this was a release that was going to be a big seller. From its special cover by Barry Windsor Smith, the red Japanese center on Bloodshot's body showing a possible correlation with him and Valiant Comics character Rai, and the comic book magazines really hyping the character. The first issue was ranked number 4 on the Diamond Comic Distributors Top 100 for November 1992, and Bloodshot Comics sold millions of copies, becoming a success for the company. Personally, for me, seeing that $3.50 cover price and seeing many fans going to comic stores searching for Valiant Comics, I knew already that purchasing anything from Valiant would be difficult. And with more titles being announced, I have to admit I was feeling worried about the quality of the stories and that Valiant Comics would get caught up with what was popular in the 90s, with variant covers and more attention to the art versus creating quality stories. And what I was worried about turned out to be correct, as Valiant Comics were no longer easy for me to purchase and read. They were being purchased by those who hoped to cash in on Valiant Comics trend and, purchasing and reselling at a high cost. Because several comic book fans knew I was purchasing Valiant Comics earlier on, I was being offered cash to purchase for people to purchase certain issues in my collection. I just remember that someone was like, "I will buy you your Solar. I will offer you this much money," and he was offering a lot. It's tough though, because I loved Valiant, but I didn't know if I wanted to make any money or sell it because it was part of my collection. But anyway, reading this issue again, many years later. It begins in L.A. Well, it begins with the INLA, actually, the Irish National Liberation Army, terrorists at Heathrow International Airport in London meeting up. while MI5 agents watch and are about to arrest the terrorists as they make a swap for their suitcase. But before they can, the terrorists are shot and killed by Bloodshot, who takes the suitcase and escapes from the airport. As Bloodshot is shot prior to escaping, we see his nanites in his blood pushing the bullet out of his body. Meanwhile, in Japan, we learn from Mr. Iwatsu at the American Project Rising Spirit, which is the Western counterpart of Musashi Labs, were working on a super soldier. While most of the super soldiers don't live long lives, one was special. A boy sneaked into Rising Spirit and tampered with the special project known as Bloodshot. Bloodshot is able to use his nanite computerized blood to communicate with the system, which others created in the project can't do, and now Musashi Labs wants Bloodshot back. And so Mr. Iwatsu, who runs Project Rising Spirit, sends 2 of his super soldiers to apprehend Bloodshot. And the story's captivating, violent, and no doubt had amazing potential. But as everyone who followed Valiant Comics knows, the company was purchased for $65 million by Acclaim Entertainment, who rebooted the Valiant universe and relaunched Bloodshot in a new direction for Acclaim Entertainment's video game releases. So reading the first volume of Bloodshot, it's a little bittersweet to know how the series changed after Valiant Comics was sold, but with a new direction in today's modern comic book industry, I haven't been following the new Valiant, but if it's still around, I hope Bloodshot is thriving, I guess. With Valiant, under Valiant Entertainment. I don't know how much has changed, but, and I don't know how the film did overall. I watched it, and it was not there were some things I remembered from the old Bloodshot that I read before and the live action movie, but I know things have changed, and this one was really hard. So I don't know if Bloodshot was ever released as an omnibus, but if it is, I might definitely check it out, because I know that I missed out on so many issues because they were just so hard to buy. But yeah, this is the first episode of this podcast. Try to keep it around 30 minutes long, something short enough for all of you to listen to and enjoy, especially during a commute, and share your thoughts with me of the comic books I spoke that I discussed in this podcast. And if anything, I hope that this talk about old school comic books brings nostalgia to you enough for you to read these comics again. I'm sorry, almost sneezed right there. But yeah, hopefully to maybe search these comic books out. They may be cheap. I don't know how much they cost these days, since a lot of people are mostly digital or trade paperback. But if you ever find these issues, definitely pick them up. These are 3 very good comic book issues worth checking out and reading and enjoying. So Bloodshot was no doubt interesting, but it kind of ushered a sense of action and violence in comic books that you really didn't see so much especially in the 90s. But of course, that's nothing in today's comic books, really. Things have changed so much since then. So, and especially if you start to read other independents and also even manga, you'll see a lot of violence in there too. So I think for anything, there was no comics code, so Valiant can do whatever they want. So, but for the most part, yeah, these 3 are really good comic books, and definitely check them out if you can. So, okay, everyone, I will talk to you later. And yeah, definitely share your thoughts with me of what you think about these issues. Okay, everyone, take care. Wink, wink, and check out my main channel page if you can, especially if you love video games. And I will see you later. Bye bye.